Atlanta Press Club Debates 2008, the race for the 6th Congressional District, is brought to you from Georgia Public Broadcasting. Here is the moderator for today's debate.
Good morning, I'm Jovita Moore, anchor reporter for WSB-TV. Welcome to our 2008 election campaign debates originating from the studios of GPB. Today's debate is organized by the Atlanta Press Club. Let's meet the candidates facing each other in the election for the 6th Congressional District. They are in alphabetical order. Bill Jones, he's an Air Force Academy graduate who is currently the CFO of a Marietta-based technology business. And Tom Price, the current Republican incumbent who is unavailable to attend because of a Finance Committee meeting in Washington. He will be represented by an empty podium. Here's the format for today's debate. In the first round, Mr. Jones will answer one question from each of our panelists. In the second round, Mr. Jones will have an opportunity to ask a question of his absent opponent. And in the third round, the panelists will continue questioning the candidate. Finally, Mr. Jones will have 30 seconds to make a closing statement. Before we get started, let's meet our three panelists selected by the Atlanta Press Club. First, we have Greg Bluestein. He's a reporter with the Associated Press. Next is Valarie Edwards. She's a reporter for GPB Radio. And our third panelist is Tom Crawford, a reporter for Capital Impact. Now let's get started with the debate. In the first round, Mr. Jones will have 60 seconds to answer one question from each panelist. Greg Bluestein gets the first question.
Mr. Jones, your opponent, Representative Price, has twice voted against the bailout package. How would you have voted?
Well, thank you for asking the question, and also thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today with the Press Club, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the voters of the 6th District. You know, one of the things as being a small businessman is I actually got up the morning of the first bailout vote and had to look at the fact that Wachovia, where we do our business accounting, was maybe going out of business that evening. And it deeply disturbed me. And I look at the rescue package, if you will, through the lens of a businessman, the lens of a father with children in college. And I was glad to see as the bill progressed that we were able to get to the point where there was a bipartisan commitment. The President, the leaders of both parties, Senator Obama and Senator McCain, and the majority of representatives on both the Democratic and party side. So I would have voted for the package at the end, although there were elements that I think all of us felt it was needed to be changed. I think that the bipartisan spirit was what was critical for Wall Street to hear.
All right, Valarie Edwards, you may now ask your question for Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones, good morning. Your opponent has indicated a support for offshore drilling. First part of the question, do you support offshore drilling off America's coast? And in particular, what would that mean for Georgia's coastline?
Well, I think I do support limited offshore drilling in an environmentally sensitive way. I think that one of the things I find so interesting at this late in the game with Congressman Price and the Republican leadership is they finally have come around to an all-above solution this late in the election year. This offshore drilling proposal that he headed up was only started in August. So I find it disturbing that after 9/11, when we had the opportunity to have this debate, we didn't take it. And that's just a failure of leadership by both the President and Mr. Price. In terms of having an environmentally safe package, I'm in agreement that we need to have offshore drilling. We need to drill in the leases that we currently have. We need solar. We need wind. We need all those things. So I'm very comfortable with the technology has progressed to the point where we can reliably offshore drill. But the interesting thing is Tom Price actually voted against offshore drilling once it was in the package. So even though he talks about all of the above and he talks about having the ability to drill offshore, once the bipartisan effort came together, he voted against it.
Okay, Tom Crawford, you get the final question in this round.
Let me follow up with the question Greg Bluestein just asked. Congress right now is also considering a major stimulus package which might call for $150 billion or maybe more in expanded federal spending. I don't think we know if your opponent's going to vote for that or against it. How do you feel about it?
Well, I'm pretty sure he's going to vote against it no matter what it contains, because his history has been to vote against stimulus packages, against the rescue plan. And I think he's in the minority. I'm glad he is, because I think he's wrong. I think that the new stimulus package seems to be, once again, galvanizing around a bipartisan effort. The chairman of the Fed feels that way. The president is endorsing it, the leaders of both parties. I think it's really unfortunate that we once again have to go back to the taxpayers to stimulate the economy. One of the challenges that I think we face is how to restore prosperity, How do we get our housing values back up? How do we get our 401ks to become 401ks instead of 201ks? So those are the kinds of things that I think we need to be looking at. I'd be very interested to see what the elements are of the proposal, because there are some things we can do realistically in the short term that will boost the economy, and we don't want to just take tax dollars and extend the debt without a deep appreciation for what it's going to do to our children and our grandchildren.
Any follow-up from the panel? No?
I did. Jovita, if you please.
Yes.
If you would please talk specifically about what offshore drilling would look like on the Georgia coast.
Well, offshore drilling on the Georgia coast is going to have to entail, first off, I think the states are going to have some say into how close. I think they're also going to have some stay based on the current patterns as to maybe what Florida does or what North Carolina or South Carolina do, because the Gulf Stream comes up from Florida, and any drilling in Florida could affect the coastal area of Georgia. So I think there has to be like a regional approach to this offshore drilling. I think it has to be done with assurances that the environmental engineering is there to take care of things. And I also think we need to make sure that we have the right kinds of response programs in place in case there are leaks. So I think if we put all those elements together, I think we can solve this problem.
Thank you, Jovita.
Okay, Valarie, thank you. That concludes round one. It is now time for Mr. Jones to pose a question to his absent opponent. Mr. Jones.
Thank you. I'm going to pose two rhetorical questions, because those are the questions we had. And I think the first thing that I'd like to ask Congressman Price is, he always makes a point of being about the fact that he's a doctor. He's one of 13 doctors in Congress, although he doesn't serve on any of the medically related subcommittees. He serves on labor, and he serves on the finance committee. So I think the question I would have for him is, we've noticed in his campaign contributions that he takes contributions from tobacco companies, specifically Philip Morris and Altera. So the question I would have for him is, as a doctor, and as knowing what the challenges are of healthcare impacts of smoking, why would a doctor take money from these kinds of organizations? So that's my first question. My second question would be, just a month ago, he was one of only 4 congressmen out of over 435 congressmen who voted against extending to the children and the parents of the people of the 6th District the kind of bailout plan that he had in student loans that they gave to Wall Street. And he's always and consistently voted against student loans. And if he were here today, I'd ask him, why does he not believe that the parents and the children of the 6th District have the same needs and rights as the Wall Street banks? So those are the two questions I'd ask him.
Would there be any money, Mr. Jones, that you would not accept? Would there be any sort of...
I would absolutely not accept any funds. I would absolutely not accept any funds from tobacco companies. I would not accept any funds from alcohol companies. I would not take any funds from any organization that I had oversight of. He had oversight, for instance, on the Finance Committee of these very organizations that have contributed to his campaign that he has failed to oversee. I think that's one of the problems with American politics. I think it's one of the things that needs to be fixed. And if I'm on a committee, I will not take money from anybody whose job it is for me to act as a representative of the American people to make sure that their interests are protected over re-election campaigns.
Mm-hmm. Tom, did you have a question? Did I see your hand go up? No. All right. Thank you very much. That concludes our second round of questioning. For our third round, we return to our panel of journalists, and we begin this round with a question from Greg Bluestein.
Hi. Folks in North Georgia are still locked in an epic drought, even though it's fallen from the headlines. How would you respond to these conditions?
Well, I think one of the keys we have to do for the folks in North Georgia and in all of the region is we're going to need to build more reservoirs. We need to improve the ability of the regulatory process to get reservoirs built and sustained. I think we need to do more in conservation. I think we need to make sure that our infrastructure is not losing as much water as it's delivering. And I think one of the things that I would do is propose that we make, people make light of this situation about the North Georgia border and the Tennessee water. But I think that there's a legitimate argument there that we can resolve through the Supreme Court or possibly Congress, where we would give up our claim to the land in exchange for the water. And I think that that's probably a long-term goal, but I think that it's something we need to look at. So I'm interested in conservation, increased capacity, and working with Tennessee to get the water that basically falls on Georgia and runs out of state before we can collect it.
Greg, did you have a follow-up?
Would you support a lawsuit or any type of legal action to press the claim to the land?
Well, I'm a businessman. I'm not an attorney. So I will let the lawyers work out the best way to do that. If I'm in Congress, I will work with the Georgia delegation and the president to try to come up with some reasonable solution so that we have a bipartisan and a mutually agreeable. A lot of the water that goes through the Tennessee River flows out without necessarily being claimed. So I think we can work something out there that'll benefit Atlanta, North Georgia, and of course the country as a whole.
All right, thank you. Valarie Edwards will ask the next question.
Mr. Jones, your opponent voted to oppose an expansion of S-chip. How would you have voted and why?
Well, I think that one of the most critical things that we need to do is look at something as whether it's a cost or if it's a benefit. And I think one of the things that is truly an investment that we need to do in terms of a benefit is to invest in children's health care. Now, the problem I have with Congressman Price's position on this is that it would have raised tobacco taxes. That's how it would have been funded. And to shield tobacco companies from profit loss in order not to cover children's health care, I think is absolutely the opposite way we should be thinking. And I appreciate that taxes need to be controlled, but to saddle children with less health care and saddle parents with higher bills and to protect the tobacco companies to do it, I think is just the wrong kind of priority and values of the people of the 6th District of Georgia.
Okay. Julie, Valarie? Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Yes. Mr. Jones took $2 million from PACs and individuals connected to the healthcare industry. Would you take money from the same group of people?
Well, I mean, the process in American politics today has to be fixed. Money has become the way that you win these campaigns, and you either need to be a very rich person or you need to be an incumbent. But the challenge is trying to find the balance between the proper use of the First Amendment and the ability of people to reach out and influence the legislative process, and actually taking money from people that you have a fiduciary responsibility, if you will, to oversee. Now, I don't think necessarily that because Dr. Price doesn't sit on any health care related subcommittees, it would be necessarily a bad thing for him to take money from them. But I think it is a bad thing to take it from the financial institutions, from the insurance companies, from the medical supply companies, and those kinds of people that he's supposed to be overseeing on behalf of the American public.
All right. Valarie, you satisfied with that answer?
Thank
okay,
you,
thank you. It's now Tom Crawford's turn to ask a question. Tom?
Thank you. I'll extend Valerie's question. Senator Obama has been talking quite a lot about universal health care coverage and how important it is to enact a program along those lines. Would you tell us if you agree with what he is proposing, or would you like to see some changes in it?
What I would like to see is an incremental step forward in the program. I would like to see S-chip expanded to about age 25 and have people be able to buy into it. For instance, I have 3 daughters who are in their early 20s. I provide insurance for them because I need the insurance on them because I'm not going to let them go to a hospital and not have proper medical care. It would be great if they had a system where young people in their, after school and prior to 25 could buy into. I think S-chip might be something like that. The other thing I'd like to see us do is bring the ability to purchase Medicare insurance down to 55, so that people who are about, they're in their productive years, they might like to start a small business or they might like to start a family business, can leave their employer as an older person and get into the Medicare system, but pay into it so that they can have those kinds of coverages and then still be able to make a reasonable payment. So 25, 55, and then we can talk about what's in the middle.
Tom, any follow-up?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Greg Bluestein, you get the next question.
You just mentioned one area where you differ with Senator Obama. Can you discuss any other topics, policies where you differ with the senator?
Well, I think probably the question that comes up the most in talking to folks in the 6th District is because of my military background, because I went to the Air Force Academy, because my father was a career enlisted man, because I spent a total of 21 years in the military, constantly the question comes up, how do I feel about the surge and how do I feel about timelines? And I think what we're seeing here is the resolution the beginning of the end of the Iraq conflict. And what we need to do is, it seems that the Iraqis themselves are setting the timelines and the goals. If those are negotiated in good faith, if those are something that both sides can agree to, then I'm not a fan of arbitrary decisions, because the point of the 16 months, which I think has been successful, the deadline is to move the Iraqi government toward a resolution. Even without being president, it looks like the philosophy worked, that the Iraqis are, in fact, moving toward coming to an agreement on how we can reduce our combat footprint and return our soldiers home.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Valarie Edwards, you get the last question for this round.
Oh, thank you, Jovita. You and I had a chance to speak last week. I'll tell the audience. Then I asked you this question, and I'll ask you again. What qualifies you to run for public office? You've never held public office. Tell me.
I think that's a great question, because I think the Founding Fathers had a lot of wisdom in building the House of Representatives around true representatives who weren't professional politicians. I don't think the House of Representatives was ever designed to be a career, and I don't think that it's a place where people should go and camp out. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate. I'm a small businessman. I'm a former Delta captain. I've worked with large industry. I've worked with small industry. I've built a company. I understand how to rebuild prosperity. I've raised a family through our great public schools. So all of these things make me very comfortable saying that I represent the values and the priorities of the people of the 6th District of Georgia. And I think that that's the kind of person we need in Washington, and I'm ready to show a new approach to politics, a bipartisan spirit, a commitment to being proactive, and working with both sides of the aisle to make sure that we move this country back into prosperity.
Are you saying your opponent has not done these things?
I'll let Congressman Price speak for himself, but in my opinion, that's why I'm running, because I think I'm better qualified to represent the values and priorities of this district than Tom Price, who's in the far right corner of a party that's literally coming apart as it's losing the middle ground. And I clearly represent the middle ground. That's my whole campaign. I'm not running from the left or the right. I'm running from the center, where the majority of votes are and where we need to have our representatives from.
Mr. Jones, thank you. Now we've run out of time for questions. We're ready for a closing statement from this candidate for the 6th Congressional District. I'd like to remind our audience that Tom Price was unable to attend the debate. Bill Jones will have 30 seconds for his closing statement. Mr. Jones.
Well, thank you, Valarie, and thank you guys for having me here today. I do appreciate the opportunity to talk to the 6th District of voters, because not only did I go to the Air Force Academy at 17 and step up to serve my country when duty called, my family has a long tradition of doing that. But more importantly, in these times, we need to make sure that we put someone in Washington who understands business, who understands finance. I've provided health care. I've built jobs. I know how to restore prosperity. I know how to restore wealth. I appreciate your vote on November 4th, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch this show today. God bless America.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind the voters that the general election will be held Tuesday, November 4th. Our thanks to the candidate and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club, you can visit www.atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived on the Press Club's website. I'm Jovita Moore. Thanks for joining us for this 2008 election debate.
This program was funded in part by a grant from the late Tom Watson Brown and by supporters of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thank you.